During a -30-degree blizzard, 9 hikers felt safer cutting their way out of their tent than staying inside. They ran blindly into the darkness, some of them barefoot, leaving every piece of survival gear behind. When they were finally found, they were miles away, some with crushed chests, others wearing clothes emitting measurable levels of radiation. In January 1959, this group of university students and graduates set out for a difficult winter trek into the Soviet Ural Mountains. Led by Igor Dyatlov, they were seasoned hikers and skiers, highly capable of navigating the extreme Siberian winter. Their route was meticulously planned, as seen in this daily itinerary. However, on February 1st, worsening weather forced a change in plans. Rather than retreating to the tree line, they pitched their tent on the exposed, windswept slope of Kholat Shakhl, a peak known as Height 1079. When the group failed to send their scheduled check-in telegram by mid-February, their sports plap raised the alarm. By late February, a massive military and civilian search operation was underway across the range. What began as a standard search for missing hikers was about to uncover a sequence of events that would leave investigators with more questions than answers for the next 60 years. On February 26th, searchers reached the campsite. The tent was collapsed and buried in snow, but the canvas had been sliced open from the inside. All the group's warm clothes, boots, and tools were still stowed inside, untouched. Leading away from the tent was a trail of footprints. Investigators noted that these tracks weren't scattered or frantic. The hikers had walked down the slope in an orderly line, showing no signs of a panicked flight from an immediate threat. A mile away, near a large cedar tree, searchers found the first 2 bodies. Despite the freezing temperatures, they were dressed only in their underwear, lying near the remains of a small fire. This behavior is a documented symptom of severe hypothermia, called paradoxical undressing. As the body's thermoregulation fails, the dying brain perceives a false sensation of extreme heat, causing victims to remove their clothing even as they freeze to death. 3 more bodies were eventually discovered on the slope between the cedar and the tent. Their positions suggested they had been attempting to crawl back up the mountain toward their shelter when they collapsed. The tracks describe a sequence that defies survival logic. A group of experienced hikers walking in an orderly line directly away from their only shelter and into the heart of a -30-degree night. The remaining 4 members of the group were not found until May, when the spring thaw finally exposed a ravine buried under 4 meters of snow. These bodies were discovered at the bottom of the ravine, submerged in a freezing stream. The autopsies for this final group revealed injuries far more severe than hypothermia. They had suffered massive internal trauma, including crushed ribs and a fractured skull. 2 were missing their eyes, and 1 was found without a tongue. The forensic pathologist compared the internal damage to the impact of a high-speed car crash. Yet the scene offered no explanation for such force. No fallen trees, no rock slides, and no evidence of a struggle. The physical evidence of the site had completely split. The injuries indicated a violent, immediate impact, while the orderly tracks near the tent pointed to a slow, methodical march into the cold. One leading theory suggests a slab avalanche. Because the hikers had cut into the slope to pitch their tent, they may have unintentionally undermined a layer of dense, heavy snow that eventually slid onto the tent, causing the crushing injuries while they slept. Skeptics argue that a small slide doesn't explain why the group would then walk a mile away without their boots. They point to the missing soft tissue and the unusual positioning of the bodies as evidence that the scene was staged to cover up a man-made accident. During this period of investigative uncertainty, the lead prosecutor made a highly unusual decision. Without any explanation in the official file, he ordered a radiological examination of the hikers' clothing. This single decision changed the nature of the case, shifting it from a tragic wilderness accident to a forensic anomaly of the Cold War. This type of radiation detector, used by expert Levashov in 1959, recorded a finding that had no obvious place in a mountain tragedy. Several items of clothing from the ravine victims were contaminated with beta-emitting radionuclide at levels significantly higher than the natural background. While it is often reported that only 3 items were radioactive, the radiological report actually shows that all 9 tested samples from the ravine bodies were above background levels. Only 3 happened to exceed the strict industrial safety standards of the time. Some physicists suggest the hikers brought this contamination with them. One worked at the Mayak nuclear facility, and another lived in a nearby village that had been affected by a major radioactive accident 2 years earlier. Radioactive contamination behaves like physical dust. It doesn't move easily between layers of heavy winter clothing. The theory that one person's work history could contaminate 9 separate items on 4 different people simply by proximity is a difficult fit for the laws of physics. An alternative theory proposes the radiation wasn't brought by the hikers, but added after they died. Chemical researchers have suggested that whoever discovered the bodies first may have dumped potassium hydroxide on them in an amateur attempt to speed up decomposition. This matches the specific data in the 1959 lab reports. Large amounts of potassium would leave exactly the kind of beta-emitting signature the radiation detectors picked up. We are left with a case where the evidence refuses to settle into a single narrative. If it was a natural avalanche, the widespread radiation is an unexplained anomaly. If the radiation was a sign of a cover-up, the presence of the bodies themselves suggests a total failure of that attempt. Dyatlov Pass remains a case where the physical tracks of the mountain and the forensic data of the laboratory simply refuse.